And I was in my office one day, just, taking the accounting of all the parts, because it's my job, take care, keep ordering all the parts, keep the stocks and inventory set up, to repair everything. So I'm doing all of that, and all of a sudden, I'm getting these downloads of sacred geometry. Now, I didn't know it was sacred geometry at that time. I'm just getting these, they had me, I could hear clearly, draw this. And so I'm drawing what they're communicating, and
looking over your shoulder.
I'm looking over my shoulder so to make sure the bosses don't see, so, okay. I'm not working, but, So I start drawing what they're communicating, and I put it together, and it's an octahedron. So I'm getting this download on this octahedron, and they said, well, there's more to it. We want you to put together, study a little bit, electrical, light, and magnetics. How do they all come together? How do they all work together? I think Bashar uses the term electromagnetheric, so it made sense later on, but I didn't know what, what's the combination of these three.
Yeah.
And so they were showing me that this octahedron, they want me to find a crystal clear octahedron, but also a crystal clear sphere. Perfect sphere.
Like this?
Yeah, very much like that. And they want me to get a, what do you call it? Focused beam light. Didn't have lasers at that time. This is in the 80s. Okay. You couldn't get ahead. Yeah, right.
Over the counter.
So the best was those krypton lights, mag lights.
Yeah, they're really strong.
Just so you can focus the beam.
Yeah.
So I'm at my desk. I'm writing all these things down that they're communicating, right? So I'm like, okay, I'll go find that. So I found a crystal sphere. I got a crystal octahedron, and then they were having. When I went home, I turn off the lights and I play with the focus beam, how it filters through a sphere, and it projects onto the wall this intense circle, a radius, that's a circumference of a small radiant sphere with a lighter sphere on the outside of it. So I started getting more and more downloads about that, and then they started telling me, move the light so that you move the sphere and the octahedron together and look at the dynamics. And then they started showing me that as you work with this, it creates rainbow frequencies. And on UFOs, this is how we power crafts. But each person has to get to the diamond in the heart, and you use this configuration in a semicircle with other beings, and you project the diamond in the heart. It's non-duality. I didn't know all those things at that time.
Right.
Project that diamond, move to that state. It creates a rainbow field around, and people that experience the field on the outside can move into coherent, integrative energy, and they could know with these different intensifications of coherent energy. And so as you got close to the center, then you could start to see in 360 all around.
So all this was told to you?
And I was experimenting, and I
playing.
had to use the exercise, so I was doing all of that, and I was getting so excited by all this stuff.
Interesting. So you were sort of told these messages, and then you physically acted them out, which would then give you more messages in a sense?
Yes.
And then you would just kind of keep going down that rabbit hole?
When you follow the message, follow the journey, then you evolve to the next state. Then we'll give you more when you reach that next state. The low-hanging fruit on the tree, you've got to pick them, you've got to digest them, and then you'll grow to the next level and pick the next hanging fruit, right?
Gotcha.
So I was listening to what they said, you know, because you can feel the divinity in what's being communicated, right? So I was practicing that. I was keeping it real reverent. And I was so curious. Yeah, weaponize your curiosity, as you say. I was so curious about this. And so, yeah, I in my meditations, you know, I would orient this thing. I had a little stand to hold them in the proper orientation to maximize the light that was being exchanged between them. But then I would, you know, use the diamond in the heart to project into it. And then all of a sudden I was, you know, I had my eyes closed. I could see in all these different directions, right? So I was going, oh, this is magnificent. I'm going to bring this out to the world. Right. I'm going to go help everybody. You know, if they have this, then I could teach them, you know, the different levels of meditation and stuff, and, you know, get them to this point where they could see in all directions and be like, ah. And one night I was practicing with this stuff, you know, doing a little more research, practicing, getting it aligned and all this. And out of the ethers came this hand. And it stopped my hand. And it was only a hand from about, just, you know, about an inch above the wrist. It stopped my hand on the table. Whoa. And I went, no more of this stuff. I packed everything up and, you know, put it away. I did not get involved with it ever again until part of that period that I talked about after the 7-year tribulation from 2006 to 2013, as Krishna was coming in and started to communicate about, you know, the shadow material and what I needed to work through. Then the PTSD work afterwards helped me then reframe all of the stories and emotions that I coagulated together and kept, you know, tied up into, you know, my own cages, right?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I had a friend, she was a stewardess on United Airlines at that time. I'm in my early 30s. She's in her late 50s or something, but she came over one day and she goes, hey, I've got all this material on sacred geometry. It was on these videos. And she said, you'll really love this. And I go, what, really? What's sacred geometry? I had no idea, right? I had no idea. So I started watching these videos on sacred geometry. And that's when, you know, I started putting together, oh, this guy's using star tetrahedral. I remember when they were downloading me on octahedral material, right? And so that opened the door for me to move back into sacred geometry and began exploring again. And by this time, now I had enough framework to look back at what happened here. Okay. Remember the assistance without interference?
Okay.
I realized that Spirit has this modality. It's a modus operandi, and it's assistance without interference. Well, I had blind enthusiasm, not recognizing how much damage I would do if I brought out this technology, right? So I felt like it took me a long time because I was freaked out. But then I realized...
Damage in what sense?
Okay, people have issues that they need to go through for themselves so that they can eventually have enough experience to mature, embrace, and then transform or integrate beyond what the challenge is. Okay? So if I was to bring out a technology, let's say that this helped meditation, move a person quickly through meditation, but they hadn't done enough shadow work, then the level of energy that's coming into the being is also going to accentuate and empower the, let's say, shadow elements, and then it's going to kind of collapse on them. They'll get me stuck in situations that are going to be overwhelming to them. They're not ready for. So each little trial and tribulation.
Of Atlantis.
That's making a big jump, but that's exactly.
But that kind of idea,
that's
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. If we know what happened with the mechanics of using light in that way, yeah.
So, I mean, it takes a certain spiritual matureness to realize that. Well, obviously you got freaked out from the hand, so that's that's just freaking out. And like, no, but still, some people would say, okay, I'm going to keep pushing on. I don't care if there's a mysterious hand. You know, I may have pushed on. I don't know.
I was one of those ones that felt like I'm entering grounds that I know nothing about. And I don't know how the next step would take. What's it going to look like if I go past this? Right? You know, do I meet the rest of the being? Am I ready to meet the rest of that being?
What color was the hand? Was it?
It was because it was at night. It was a little more darker. Okay. It was just but now I realize, yes, 5 fingers. Oh. Now I realize it was myself.
Oh. Oh, yeah, you do have a little bit darker skin than I do. Wow. That's cool.
Yeah. And so as I started getting into the geometry, eventually, now this didn't happen overnight, but as you move into those deeper spaces, I was learning how the geometric forms connect, from the heart, and especially to the spiral. The preeminent form is the spiral, and the spiral then begins to create all the angular geometries. So as I was learning more from the sacred geometry, I was also experiencing being inside of some of those power spots, and Mother Earth would begin to show me different fields of the geometric forms, and eventually I began to understand that they extended out and connect from you to all creation, and that there was, I'm just remembering, it's like a oh no moment.
Oh, really? Okay.
The reason why I'm saying oh no moment is because in the geometry, when we were doing the facilitation of the workshops, one way to help students learn about the different, the sacred geometry and its proportion around the body was to carry a geometric model that was life-size, right? So then they can learn the exact dimensions. Well, it didn't, at that time, you had baggage restrictions, and I didn't want to be traveling all over the international world with
big geometrical shops. Yeah.
So I decided what I would do is have people stand up and hold the distance of each of the angles on the geometry in the masculine form or the feminine form. And when they did, it came as an accident, but I noticed that people began spiraling. And that just stunned me, that what's this phenomena that's happening? Every time I put somebody in there that's somewhat sensitive, they naturally start moving in one direction or the other. And then, I started peering into it a little bit deeper, and I found, oh yeah, it's the golden mean spiral. And you could, exactly. So you can see the heart has naturally located within it the end point and the beginning point of different spirals. Well, at first, the linear mind goes, oh, is it just one spiral that goes down, one spiral that goes up? Well, how's that work? And so I went, and did a number of different experiments, investigations. I'd go to the power spots to try to get real sensitive, magnify the experience, and I found that just as you have a geometric model, let's use this model right here. So just as you have a geometric model, each of these planes has a spiral to it that terminates at the very center. So it's easy to then take this one step forward, and if you understand how the geometries, the platonic solids, nest one inside of the other, you could imagine then that there's infinite numbers of, that's a good example.
Right.
So not only are these, radiant lines, so let's say this is masculine energy moving into the diamond or out of the diamond in the heart, the diagonals connect all of the nodal points that connect all of the different geometric sets that extend all the way down to the center and extend all the way out. And there's many other complicated forms that all are act in addition to this. But it's simple. This is simplified to help you understand and see clearly that the diamond in the heart connects geometrically to all geometric sets going out, not just angularly, but also through that spiral. So literally we have spirals and we have geometric forms that are, and this eventually led in deeper investigation, it led to the experience of the fractalization of each and every fractal is connected to so much sacred geometry that it can't lose its place.
Well, and then your work, you started connecting the dots for these sacred geometries overlaying the planet.
Yeah.
And with these power spots.
Yes.
Can you explain that a little bit? Your
In
discovery.
In this work, I was going to the different power spots and stuff, and eventually I came across, the original. Let's say they're simplified graphics of the Christ consciousness grid that exists around the planet. Now, in 1958, the Russians are the ones who first came up with taking some of these geometric forms, combining them together and locating different points on the planet where the Christ consciousness grid actually anchors into the planet. So the planet holds not just...
why do they call it the Christ? I mean, I know what Christ consciousness is, but why does it get that name? Why isn't it like Krishna consciousness or something? Or I guess it's kind of the same. but I mean, why that term, Christ consciousness grid?
If, like, I'm going to these different power spots and I'm finding I can, as I move in resonance and tune with frequency of the Earth, the Earth's loving integrated energy, well, it moves you quickly through beta to alpha to delta, gamma, epsilon, and it just keeps going.
Right.
So as you sit inside of these power spots, you start opening up, and as you open different layers, it actually sends a signal out to you're ready to accept more frequencies. Okay. So if we move to, as you're moving up through these frequencies, you move from the separated consciousness, the beta consciousness, I'm just this person with this identity and these concerns and so on. So as you're moving to different layers and levels, you start embracing more of the realm and the reality around you. So I was experiencing that as you go deeper into these things, there's actually, an overlay of frequencies that moves you to such a state. Now, here's where we get into a little refining.
Okay.
Now, there's bliss, right? And as we move early on in our spiritual path, bliss becomes, let's say, the target, right? And so we'll do anything to maintain bliss, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And if you are in such a degree where you're doing anything and everything possible to maintain bliss, then you don't see how much of a burden you're becoming on the others around you that are needed to help support you being in that state of bliss. So it's kind of
it's like an addict.
It's like an addict.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of escapism that takes place in there, and it's really an unconscious state. And this is just a preparatory. I mean, everybody goes through this facet, this stage of consciousness. Well, as you get more experience, you find that a lot of those addictive and seductive forms to keep you in bliss have a price to pay. And so eventually it leads to a maturity and you begin to realize, oh, I need to work on something else to, come to that place of stability in myself. So at this point, with that maturity that comes in, and the experimentation is part of that process, but you get to the point where you want to be a little more responsible about and mindful about everything that goes into each stair step that leads to, let's say, that integrative state that allows you to maintain a little more bliss for a little bit longer.
Right.
That level of understanding, because mindfulness is added to the equation of your spiritual path and the movement towards that refined state, integrative state, that is more conscious state.
Right.
So in the geometries, if we had a dodecahedron. I used to build the dodecahedron.
Which is, do we have any?
That's this one here.
Yep.
If you build this, you can see it when you build it out of straws. When you build the dodecahedron out of straws, it's there's two shapes.
The exterior
this one,
right?
This one, yes. If you build it out of straws, there's only two shapes that can't hold its form. The cube, which represents mentality, logic and reason, and the dodeca, which is the heart and bliss consciousness, but it's unconscious bliss. So this is not really mindful. When you become mindful, it stellates, which adds in, if you lift that geometry next to you, to add in these properties here. This is knowing what it takes to hold.
It triangulates each one. Each dodecahedron has a has a 5-star
in sacred
point.
Geometry, without having to get really deep into it.
Yeah.
Stellations represents mindfulness. When you add mindfulness to your spiritual path, then it becomes Christ consciousness.
Okay, that's how the term Christ consciousness comes up.
And it's about doing the shadow work and having the non-duality.
Right.
Then the stellations assist the dodecahedron in holding its space. Otherwise, if it's not stellated, then it kind of leans on
one side.
Yes, it leans on others around it.
Right.